especially to Irene, who I don't know where she is. She's around here. Raise your hand there. For the excellent preparation of the prior period to us being here. Thank you very much, Irene, for your collaboration and your patience sometimes. Thank you very much. Okay, in this respect, listening to the presentations from this morning and the one before that Jose gave, we were just talking about it during the break, has made me rethink some things, and I'm going to change some things in the presentation. You tell me if I need to change something or not. I had prepared 4 parts. The fourth would be a conversation, questions, whatever. Normally we start with the third part, which is when we do these presentations. We go to schools, workshops, associations, businesses who comes to visit us. We start with the third part. I've made it the third because I understand that maybe the most important thing for today is to explain how the Gramma works, how we've arrived to where we are, and what the prospects for the future are. What is the foundation for the future? But as I listened this morning, I felt that a lot of the problems that you're encountering, maybe we've already experienced them. We've tried to learn. I don't know if we've learned a lot or not, but we've made some changes, okay? A lot of the problems sounded familiar, especially communication, so if you can intervene at a moment you want to expand on a topic, I'm going to present various ideas from the questions you asked me because there's a lot and maybe we won't have time to talk about it. In any case, that would be part 2, which is the explanation about the Gramma. And part 1, again, a lot of things that came out this morning related to public administrations. Also, Jose has talked about some things related to public administrations. So I'll start with public administrations. I promise not to be too boring. These organizations are designed so that nothing gets done. We'll see if we can come up with an idea so that they can get something done, and later we'll move on to the Gramma. And if we have to extend the topic on Gramma, well, it means that it's worked really well. So to start the topic on the public administrations related to currencies, complementary and social currencies, use whatever label you want to. From our point of view, we understand that the public administration must be involved. It has to be, if not the promoter, it has to believe in the project of creating a public currency or complementary or whatever, but it's not that also. What we understand is that the public administration must have a project, an objective. It has to know what it wants to do, and from there we can study if the best instrument to develop what it knows it wants, or the objective it wants to develop, is the application of a currency, or not maybe sometimes as a result of studying this, you find out that the solution is not a currency but something else. This is our perspective, our way of understanding the topic. Because if we're not talking about an instrument, a tool, but not about an objective. So when we go to a public administration talking about a tool, and when we talk about the objective, it's strange, a strange conversation. So I propose some of you who have participated in this silly thing, I ask you, what do you see here? And you answer. Let's see if someone is willing to. Those of you who know, don't participate. Don't ruin it for me, a normal person. We're normal people, I understand, but there are more normal people. So if I show you these 2 elements, what you see on the screen, would someone be willing to say what it is I'm showing you? What's on the screen? How could you define it? currency, bills, paper. Some say a 1, others say a 5. You say 1,000 things. Just a point, you can see here the Totnes currency. The 21st is of Totnes, Exeter, a 4.5 there in the middle, see? Or the currency of Oris from Ithaca, and also conventional money. It's money, paper money, numbers. Okay. That's what I wanted to know. This is what happens when we approach a public administration. In other words, for normal people, maybe it's currency, maybe it's paper, maybe it's, and it is, money. But it's also an instrument, it's a tool. It's only the means to get to an end. It's not the end in itself. We could speak for hours about currencies. This is just a means. We also have to understand that it's a means to get to an end. If we interiorize it ourselves, it's easier to relate this to a public administration, and they can buy into the topic as long as there's a project or an objective. We always part from this base. Some city halls tell us we want to implement a currency. It's as if they tell you we want to implement a finalization card because I want to promote business. Well, okay, fine. But why do you want a currency? What's your objective? What's your idea? Talk to me about the idea. Let's see. Later, there's a whole series of procedures and protocols which will allow to see if the instrument is this one or that one. I remember, I'm not going to go into details, but it was many years ago, I went to work for a city hall. I was supposed to be the person in charge of economic resources, but the budget, the way a municipal budget is organized, many of you know, it can be a real chaos because they teach you this at the university. You have to take a specific course in civil service, divided in chapters, divided in parts. Okay, to go from one chapter to another, you have to get past the council meeting. If it doesn't get by the meeting, it can be pretty complicated. But we have observed that in the expense part, there are a series of possibilities that are given to us by the public administrations and the municipal budgets that allow us to intervene differently than how interventions have been done traditionally up to today. And that's with the complementary currencies. We have to keep in mind that a municipal budget in the context of a city hall, but we could change it to other contexts. There's no problem. A provincial government, there's no problem. A municipal budget is renewed every year. For example, the city of Santa Coloma de Gramanet is around 100 million euros every year. 100 million euros every year. Its competition is nobody. The income is guaranteed, be it contributions from taxes, fees, contributions from the state, other resources. We're not going to go into the expenses, but yes, the income. The expenses are done every year. Can't we think about a different way that these expenses that are yearly with the same party, without competition, have an impact or a greater value without modifying the idea of an expense? We think so. We have detected several possibilities. In Santa Coloma, we use one of these possibilities. For example, the expense of salaries. We can make it so that voluntarily the employees of the public administration, elected positions, positions of trust, etc., participate voluntarily, and part of their salary, they can receive it in complementary currency. That's a possibility that exists. I'm not saying it's easy, but it exists. Chapter 1. That's Chapter 1 of a municipal budget. Chapter 2, ordinary expense. How much does a city hall, a public administration, spend so it can function normally? Small examples. printer, inks, paper, and a bunch of things to buy, and many times, normal when they're large purchases, you get involved in bids. Buying locally is considered. I know it's not easy, it's complicated, but this possibility exists. Chapter 2. And Chapter 3, which is the one we use in Santa Coloma de Gramenet, are the subsidies that each administration gives to local projects that need to be subsidized. There's a series of beneficiaries who receive public assistance to develop their projects. Is there a condition placed on these projects so that the money and these entities give stays in the city? Not at the moment. Chapter 4, this is a possibility of the complementary or local currencies. In Santa Coloma, we have chosen this possibility as the staging point, as the system to manage a complementary currency of an instrument. Like I said before, of this instrument without increasing the resources for its management, nor seriously change the internal workings of an administration. Later we'll see the data and you can judge for yourself if it works or not. At the end, we'll consider on whether we're able to show that what we're doing with this expense, if it has an impact in the city, on the people that live there and in all of the community. If we can show that this has an impact and it works, we can start to think about the mutation of a product. It's a product, an instrument, to a service. Our idea is headed in this direction. It's a final consideration, but I'm just letting you know. What do we do with the subsidies? The structure of how this system works is based on willingness. When a society or a local entity needs a subsidy, it requests it voluntarily. You accept these aids if you want to. If you don't, you don't. Therefore, in this willingness and the authority that City Hall has, and the written rules on the subsidies, if you include a clause that says that a part of the subsidies, or all of the subsidies that I can give you, that traditionally have been given in euros, if I condition it and say that, okay, 50% I'll give to you in euros and 50% I'll give to you in a local currency that you have to spend in a network of commerces, companies, products, and local services. If you don't want to, you don't have to participate. There's no problem. And if you want to, that's the condition. Later we'll get into more conditions that we can use, and in fact we use with Grammas. But so as not to get stuck on the particulars, let's say the system is that City Hall grants some subsidies. They are conditioned, in this case, in Grammas and the associations and entities, depending on which association has a greater percentage of Grammas or greater percentage of euros. The associations have the authority to request 100% of the subsidy in Grammas, or an amount that's convenient for them, but never less than what is stipulated in the rules. If it's 50%, you can't request less than 50%. 50% in Grammas. If you want more. If we have time, I'll explain what advantages this has for associations. More than 150 entities every year receive aids in Grammas voluntarily. They present projects, and the condition is that they will receive part in Grammas. Imagine that. 150 entities. This means 150 projects for the local community. If we do this exercise, it's because if the entities don't exist, when euros were used to pay, The great majority of administrations pay in euros. Let's see, I'm saying it badly. All administrations pay in euros, okay? Except Gramma and some other cases, but except Gramma, it is conditioned. If there aren't associations, when they pay in euros, they go to this bucket. The associations, since there are no conditions, the money goes, it leaves. It's the classic way of explaining it. Bristow does it that way too, and we thought it was a good idea to explain it to our merchants. I say merchants, maybe I should say businessmen. A merchant is obviously a businessman, and we always talk about business people. In language, in communication, we look to articulate our own discourse that allows us to get close to each of the other people. One thing is the associations, and another is business people. The circuit, at a minimum, has in the second wave a break on the money that would leave the community, and it's the condition for associations to receive Grammas. Let's move ahead. What's implied by understanding from the onset the type of aid you're going to give or the type of subsidy you're going to give in the network that you're going to build, that you need to build? From our point of view, there are a lot of implications. The key is to have a network based on the type of person who is going to receive the aid. It's not the same. It's not that evident that all the subsidies can be reinvested in the same network. How can I explain it? For example, if we who are using the Gramma, what we've done was select 3 categories, to say it some way or another, of beneficiaries, those who are merchants, commerce, culture, sports, initially. Now new activities have entered. All those people who want to begin a new activity can opt to a series of aids. And also from the political point of view, they have wagered on promoting the restaurant business, which is a powerful sector, and they have allocated some aid for the restaurant business. This is a group of families that built a specific network in the case of Barcelona, or San Juan de Alnafarache, they are social aids. If you allocate these aids to people who are at social risk, build another type of network. I'll explain. As long as you want the network to recirculate the expense that the associations spend in the network. In other words, City Hall, certain beneficiaries, if they're not social aids, but a type of help that inside the network have specific needs. I'm not talking about citizenry, I'm talking about business people. And we'll talk about citizenry later. If you want this network to work by itself, it's evident that a designer, a manager, someone who knows information technology, can paint, well, it might be necessary, if it's for beneficiaries at social exclusion risk, need another type of network. They need nourishment, hygiene, pharmacy, etc. There are 2 different networks, and what does that mean? If they're pharmacies, nourishment, you'll need bars and restaurants, okay? So it conditions the network to be autosufficient. Do you follow? If I need hardware stores because they need to fix the goalposts, then they need hardware. A person who is at risk of social exclusion doesn't need a hardware store, but there are aspects here, like everywhere. Why do I say this? I say this because the network of Santa Coloma is a B2B network at this moment. We're in our 6th year. We've been 2.5 years in the street, and we still haven't included the citizenry. Actually, we haven't gotten in touch with them. No communication, initiative, or tendency for the citizenry to enter. All the efforts have been directed to build a strong network and powerful, solidary, and safe, and that would understand the system. We understand that if the network doesn't understand the system, we'll do very little when the citizenry enters. So we have City Hall supplying the subsidies. Different types the network conditions us, and now we have a network with these types that I've mentioned. The associations receive these aids and they spend in the network that's autosufficient. Later we'll see data. It functions. One buys here, another buys there. They can change when they want to, no limits. There are some small details, but not significant. You can change what you want, when you want, the amount you want, at the moment you want. City Hall returns. I have Grammas, I want euros. City Hall gives you euros, and they destroy the Grammas, no problem. Later we'll see some nuances. So what happens when the network is working by itself, we advance the bucket a little more towards a third wave. The amount of money that City Hall injects as far as subsidies is so important, it's just as important that it circulate as many times as possible. And what about the citizenry? Well, the citizenry, in the end, I've already mentioned we've been 2.5 years building a network, and the citizenry won't enter into this for at least a year. Imagine the timing that's underway. Thinking, planning, organizing. That's the idea. So that the bucket can move a little more, so that when they enter, everything is very natural. This doesn't mean that there's not a citizen user. Yes, there is. Because a merchant, a businessman, has a businessman account, but at the same time says, I get part of my salary, or I have a worker who is willing to receive, and some who have voluntarily have requested to enter the system. Yes, there are private people, but we don't promote any of them, nor do we worry a lot if they don't understand the system. They have come voluntarily, so they already understand it. We've talked hours, if not days, with all the users. All of the users have passed through a conversation with members and promoters of Gramma people who talk about this and have a method to reach different users. Okay. As a summary of this first block is to have a clear idea of what the objective is. Santa Coloma's objective was, when this was designed, was to optimize the public spending so that it would have the biggest impact and the more value in its city. This was the impact, and it was obtained. And now we're going after other objectives. The idea was that if you know how much money you spend, we can ask, there are exceptions, how many city halls and administrations have done this exercise of when we pay subsidies, how much stays here, how much leaves? We did this exercise, and turning it around, we asked, what opportunities does the money that leaves gives us? If I know where the money goes because I have the bills, I know where and how much was spent. I know on what projects, etc. Doing an analysis, it's public documentation. We as managers of a local currency, we have access to, and we do, we know that what's missing in the community, we know what products are needed, what quantities, then we can collaborate with these entities. If you spend this outside the community, you have to know that there are these services here too, but they're too expensive. That's another debate, but they are here, so we have to expose this, and also with the business people. This is an exercise that allows us to do a lot of pedagogy. The bottom line is to reflect on what we can do differently from what we've been doing up until now. It's about changing the paradigm. This is where we're working now. A question? If not, I'll continue. From the perspective of the administration, no. Like I said, it's about getting involved as little as possible in the regular workings of an organization that has its organizational culture. And however little you want to change it, you'll have problems. We try in the designing of the project not to change the existing protocols. The operation is the same. You write up some rules for subsidies. You write the conditions that have been studied. Each department introduces theirs. Cultures introduces theirs, sports and commerce theirs. For example, those socio-cultural entities that are paid up to 75% in Grammas and 25% in euros. On the other hand, sports are paid 50% in Grammas and 50% in euros, unless they request a bit more. Why? Because it's been studied and sports entities have to pay federation fees and pay referees that come from outside the community. So they have a higher necessary expense in euros. But each department knows what quantity they need. The document with the rules, like they normally do it, with the conditions, and they have it approved in committee. Technical filters, it's valued, it's approved politically, it goes to the treasury, and they are told that you have to pay this entity 50% in Grammas, as an example, and 50% in euros to these beneficiaries that are on a list. Treasury approves it, and they pass it on to the information computer services. It's automatic. At the same time, the order goes to the amount of Grammas that must be paid are sent and blocked to an account of an ethical entity, the Triodos Bank. They are blocked. If we have to give 1,000 Grammas, it's automatic. It's a computer process. 1,000 Grammas are blocked in an account, and at the same time, the order is given to the computer system to pay each of the beneficiaries that have presented, that have been awarded the money. So what happens? The beneficiaries of subsidies that are entities and associations receive these Grammas, and they use them to do their activities, their proposals, and they spend them in the network that I talked about earlier of business people, and this circulates. The very business people have chains of suppliers that amongst themselves they make these Grammas circulate. If anyone wants to exchange the Grammas, they press a button In the computer system, an order is given via computer synopsis. The orders are sent to Treasury, and Treasury says there are X amount of requests to exchange Grammas to euros. Fine. Since it's authorized and the same amount is in the blocked account, what happens is that those who have requested the exchange are paid from the blocked account. No, it's an extra budget account. It's the system. It works. It's not problematic. From the point of view of administration, this is a basic question. This is a basic question that you are asked from the beginning. Treasury, from intervention. How do we do it? Well, it's that way. It's solved. It's not a problem. Okay, the second part. Here, you can interrupt me because I'm interested in explaining the project, which is what interests you more than pedagogy, which I understand you already know, though some details we'll talk about, especially about communication. Okay. No. I'll sum it up quickly. From the point of view of accounting, there's no problem. It's more from the point of view of resources that there might be in the Department of Treasury, Human Resources, Computer Resources, but from the legal point of view, it's resolved. So the debate will be another. The treasurer needs another person to be working on this issue, or that once in a while updates to the computer system or of the currency to have a control. But it's more a resources issue, an internal issue, not a legal one. And as far as the tax, IVA, city halls don't charge IVA, so there's not a problem. It's not a debate. But there's not a problem there. We'll talk about it if it's convenient. When we finish at 8, we can keep talking, okay? First, I'll focus on where we are in Santa Coloma de Granamet. If I'm not consistent with what I've said, then I don't feel comfortable. In other words, what was the problem with Santa Coloma? We need a project. What happened in Santa Coloma de Gramanet? When we started the project, the problem was that of every 10 euros that were paid in subsidies to commerce, sports, and culture from the departments of commerce, culture, and sports, only 2,9 would stay in the city. 7,1 would go out. They would disappear, or we didn't know where they went. It was clear that 2,9 remained in the city. The question that I did at the end of the first part, what can we do differently than what we're doing now to increase the retention of public spending that every year we provide to the entities and for it to stay in the city? What can we do? The local multiplier index, which is the value that every euro has at the moment that it was paid, was 1,80. If you remember this data at the end, you'll see our results. And if anyone is interested in how we did the study, then we at the end of the presentation can talk about it, or in these upcoming days. I'm here until Sunday. Santa Coloma de Gramanet is this area. It's here next to this southern neighborhood called Barcelona. Here it is. This is the center. Excuse me. I don't know if I need to talk over here. Is it necessary to speak here so that it's recorded? Okay, no problem. It's okay. Well, what's important here? Santa Coloma de Gramenet is surrounded by a mega huge city. The center of the city is 15 minutes from a mega mall. Apple's second store installed in Spain was installed here. The mall is huge, and it's a 15-minute walk from the center of Santa Coloma. But here, there's another huge shopping center. IKEA, what was Carrefour, mega big. Then there are 3 subway lines that connect to Barcelona. Every day, there's a vacuum of 14% of the population that leaves Santa Coloma and doesn't return because they work out of the city. I won't say it's a sleeping town, but there's a daily drain of people who don't work in the city. It doesn't attract people to work there. There's hardly any industry, the same as the case of San Juan de Aznalfarache. There's no agricultural land. It's 5 square kilometers, 120,000 inhabitants. It's the second city with the lowest income per person in Catalonia. So this is the situation. And you have to be aware of this topic when you want to get involved. So it was of interest to maintain the public spending in the city. The Chinese population is the highest in Catalonia in Santa Coloma. It's the Chinese community, but 20% of foreign population resides in Santa Coloma. So when we talk about feelings of belonging, feelings of identity, well, maybe it's not Santa Coloma, okay? Older people. 20% of the population is over 60, and 17% is less than 14. So the active working population is in this fringe, 117,000. And then 11% receive basic help from social services with this chronic percentage. This means that they're used to receiving every year this amount. There are some people who have grown accustomed to get the same help every year. They are part of the system. Others are going through a bad period and they can be helped. They're helped because they're going to get over this, and there are other characteristics. But there's this large permanent number of every important assistances for these types of situations. You can see that for every 100 people, how many there are. Economic activity. 1,882 businesses, 59% are commercial activities that give us an idea of the makeup of the network. 60%. I've said that there's no industry, no agriculture. It's the economic activity of the people. But let's see the chart from the last 10 years, up until 2017. The disappearance of that you can't see it. The commercial activity has dropped here. Building business activity and small industry businesses have dropped off in the past 10 years. This is the average. Of the 59% of commercial activity, 568 is from restaurant businesses, almost half and half. Restaurant business means bars, cafeterias, farms, wineries, restaurants. But restaurants, you have everything from the person who arrived 2 weeks ago, coming from another culture, maybe Pakistan, who knows, up to a Michelin star. All of these are in the Gramma. We have the Michelin star and the families from other cultures who also have their small business. And now we're going to the Gramma. This is the Gramma network. As of today, 740 users, of which 350 are businesses, 150 are associations. It's what I said before, okay? It's a B2B system. In other words, the 350 businesses are managing this, and they're functioning. I buy from you, you pay me. Perfect. Currently, maybe some of the sums don't make sense because I've rounded off some numbers to make them more understandable. Of the current 800,000 Grammas introduced into the system, all of them are still not introduced into the system. It's a precaution until the end of the year. Currently, 250 of which 156 are in hands of these businesses that are making them circulate, and 79,000 still in associations. I say still because they are going to spend in the business. It's an excess that when we monetize, it must be clear that when we pressure the entities or help them with their expenses in the circuit. Later we have 93 businesses that have 26,000 euros. That must be. It is one of the conditions that are in some of the rules when they are granted. They must spend Grammas. We know there are 26,000 Grammas that will be spent because the association can also exchange Grammas. There's no problem with going to a city hall and saying, I have 1,000 Grammas and I want 1,000 euros. They can do it, no problem. But some cannot. In this case, it's the 93. This is the evolution of the introduction of Grammas from 2016. It goes from bottom up. The first year, 6,750. You can imagine 6,000 euros the first day. It's deposited in 2 payments to an association, 6,000 in one payment and 750. The team said, fantastic. Now we've paid, this is going to work. 3 months went by and there was some movement. One that, okay, that's the first reflection. If you don't move, you don't go out into the street, there isn't going to move. So there's a new conversation started, a new project. What we had written or thought of at its inception. The second year, 137,280, and now at the end of the year will reach 800,000. The circulation in the first year, because it was the 28th of December, so it wasn't very significant, but to introduce 137,000 and have as a result 315,000 as a monetary mass. When we got to 281, the monetary mass went up to 1,200,000, and now we're at 365,000. We're in October. We're going to surpass this amount. But the most significant thing, more than anything from our point of view, that these numbers, well, they're only numbers, behind are a lot of stories, and stories are told with transactions. We more than the amount of money, local circulation, speed of the money, very technical terms. What we want is what we study is the number of transactions, because 25,300 transactions means 50,000 conversations, 50,000 people who have intervened when there's a transaction. There are 2 people who intervene. It doesn't matter if you're a businessman or a private citizen. It doesn't matter. It's 2 people, but you'll say that some do more than 2 transactions. fine. It doesn't matter. 1,000. 1,000 transactions. Can we go down to 1,000, not 50,000? We're satisfied there are 1,000 stories, 1,000 conversations, and all of this makes up a collective story. And when we talk about feelings, belongings, and identity, this strengthens the network and the project. I insist that it's not the amount of money that's introduced, nor the amount of times it circulates, which is important. It's more important to buy coffee for €1 than to spend 20,000 euros because I bought a van. The amount in transactions is important. It's what we prioritize. Something that may surprise you is that we're inviting we're inviting some businessmen to exit the circuit because we have a demand from people who want to enter, and we're interested that there be conversations, transactions. If you're stagnant and there's no apparent reason or whatever, there are different motives. We have a system to help in the network. The users have become auditors of the network. Then there is a system of information. Everyone knows one another. Some users we are inviting to leave. 50, more or less. We're around 50. Okay? Grammas withdrawals in the first year, 0, the 28th of December. The second year, 7,228 requests for exchange, some repeated. It doesn't mean 28 users who requested the exchange, but some are repeated. 67,000 the second, and in this year, 142. But we are starting to promote that they remove Grammas from the system. Maybe I'll repeat myself. It's the second year and a half that we're there, so we've learned something. Because in many cases, I don't want to give examples, because basically they're filming and because of prudence. To me, prudence, I don't say it in a derogatory sense, but in the sense of communication and argument. It's something that we understand in the team. We have to be very discreet, and depending on the information that users have told us, I say it from that point of view. There are causes for whatever reason, because now I have to pay the IVA tax, I have to make a purchase, and I have some Grammas. It'd be great to use them. Well, use them. No problem. Some very implicated users, or not as implicated, it doesn't matter, that when they requested an exchange, they would apologize. And they would explain why they need the money. I have to pay IVA tax, I have to buy a van. This is not normal. This is not normal. So in this conversation, we didn't want to get involved. If you have Grammas that you have to use them. Please don't apologize. There's no need for an excuse. It's not that we don't want to know, it's just that it's not normal. Normality comes when you see monitoring that there are Grammas that aren't going to be used. If I have 20,000 and you only use 2,000, take out 18, no problem, and keep using these 2,000. You don't cause tension in the system. You're not required to ask for forgiveness. Quite the opposite. Thanks for using the Grammas. Thanks for making the system work. And we won't be so tense because we see that this guy has 15,000 Grammas. We should do something. No. because we have a system of traffic lights. When it's red, something should be done. No, we're going to help, because I'll tell you later. I'll leave it at that. 5 minutes, okay. The third part, I'm not going to explain it, so you can have the chance to ask questions, and that way we'll finish up with the part of Grammas. What's going to happen? Here's the map that you initially saw that was empty of little flags. Now it's full of little flags with each of the businesses that receive Grammas. The first piece of information that I wanted to, if you remember the first piece of information, the first year, those 2,9 Grammas and 7,1 remained, disappeared. The first year of every 10 euros, 0,5 disappear and 9,5 are what remain in the city. This is a piece of information that's been studied. In other words, we've analyzed it. We could talk about the methodology. It's to be trusted, there's no doubt. And the multiplier index goes to 1,96. I don't remember, almost to 3 by the end of 2018. Now, at the end of 2019, we'll do a new study of the complete year. The final considerations are that it's more important for people to move €1 each than to keep 20. Get them out. And when I'm asked what's the cost for a businessman to belong to the network, it depends. From our point of view, it's a huge cost. You can't pay it in currency. The cost of solidarity, in other words, if you're in the network, you must be an accomplice of the network. You have to be worthy of being in the network. The rest of the users, if they accept you, it's because you deserve to be there, because you bring a value, you're solidary, you're proactive. This is the cost. It's not an economic cost, it's a solidary cost. It's the argument we use with everyone. The cost is high. It's not free to be in the network. The benefits are those that you want because the cost is high. Finally, we find, this is the design of the process we did 6 years ago. We designed a project. We had an objective for 3 years. We were planning phase 1, like in a lab. There was nothing external like a scientist with his test tubes. From 4 perspectives, legal, technological, economic, and socio-economic, to call it something, and organizational culture from the City Hall. Once the system was designed, the next phase was to introduce a first payment into the system. The first phase, the second phase. Paper holds everything, and in the street you learn a lot. You make mistakes, you fall, you learn. The users are auditors. They tell you things happen that are different than what you planned, and after 2.5 years we find ourselves here doing a reset, an audit of how things worked in order to project the next 4 years. That with the Assembly of Cooperation of La Paz and ClickCoin, we are developing a new project, a new phase of the Gramma. This would be the model for management, but for the colleagues who are coming after, we can talk about it later. I'm at your disposal for questions. First of all, congratulations on the results of this project, which are spectacular. I have 2 questions. One, very general. How do the elected positions value this, and to what point do they understand it to consolidate it into future budgets Is there a political commitment so that this experience is maintained? Is it going to be used in other areas? Will the ones from the experience that have worked be maintained? What are the possibilities that it will keep growing? And the other question is, I don't know if I understood it. You've only injected resources via Chapter 4 of current transfers of assistance and subsidies exclusively? Only that. But they've only gone to businesses. All of this amount has been moved by doing subsidies and assistance to business. How do you give assistance in that quantity to business? No, I'll start with the last question, and then you remind me of the first one because I can't remember it. No, the assistance goes to commerce associations, or local entities that have to do with commerce. In other words, group markets, market concessionaires, commerce associations. There's only one socio-cultural association. In other words, there are a lot of religious topics, health, that work in different areas, culture, society. I'd like to give you examples, but I can't think of any. Anonymous, rehabilitation, interreligious associations that promotes this, local festivals, retiree associations, neighbor associations, PTAs, schools. Assistance is given for projects that they submit. Part of this aid is in Grammas and sports clubs. I always joke about the amount of petanca clubs in Coloma. Petanca is a retiree's paradise, but this is where the aid goes. It goes to this type of users, entities that develop activities that need to acquire products and services in this network of users who are the local business people. In other words, it goes to the commerce, but through the entities. At any moment, the entities can get out any amount of money. Business people can get out, except some with certain conditions. I don't know if I answered your question. And the other, what are the projections for the future? Just like Jose said, in the Santa Coloma City Hall before the elections in May, did a contest by means of an administrative license to award the management of the local currency to a technical office for external companies that whoever wins the contest, there is a budget for the next 4 years, okay? They wrote up a document with the conditions, and those of us who presented the project, we adapted ourselves to the document, and we introduced our contribution, and the result was 4 or 5 months ago we started. We're in the audit phase of what's happened up to now to project 4 years and how do they see it. There is direct support from the mayor and the first lieutenant mayor. There's an absolute majority from the Socialist Party. The governor of economic promotion is very involved. The technicians are the first to believe in the project. In fact, it comes from the convincement from City Hall when it was begun 6 years ago. This is a project in which many people have participated in, and I'm here representing them because they trust me, but any of us could be here. In fact, Jaume, Andrea were here. Everyone has contributed. Everyone has generated knowledge, and we are responsible to continue this, and who knows, transfer this knowledge to whomever needs it. Thank you very much.